Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for our Something from Nothing workshop. As Tom said, my name is Kat and I'm one of the lecturers here on FCP and FMB. And today we're going to be doing a really fun, really exciting concept workshop about thinking about ideas. So I am going to attempt now to share with you my screen so as we can get going. Can I just confirm, Tom, that you can see my screen? Excellent. Fab. It's thinking about it. Okay. So welcome to this morning's Something from Nothing workshop, a fashion publication concept workshop. So I'll just introduce myself in a little more detail. So, like I said, my name's Kat and I'm one of the lecturers here on FCP and FMB. Before I started lecturing, I've worked predominantly in fashion media, all forms of fashion media, including magazines such as Another Man and Dazed and Confused. And that's after graduating with a first in graphic arts. So I did graphic design and got into fashion that way, only because FCP courses didn't exist when I went to uni, which makes me feel quite old. But if they did, I would have definitely been an FCPer, I think. So following my interest in generating conceptual ideas, so thinking about big overarching ideas, I then pursued a career in luxury fashion branding and advertising at an agency. So that's predominantly about creating 360-degree campaigns for luxury boutique brands such as Savannah Miller, if you've heard of that, and international fashion houses as well, such as H&M, Calvin Klein. Big brands like that. So a real mix of everything. And this desire to really get under the skin of a brand and learn about its mechanics led me to in-house art direction. So I worked for a number of brands over a number of years, basically telling their story. So as you can imagine, narrative and storytelling are what drives my creativity. And they're huge players in the type of exercise that we're going to have a look at today. So we're going to dive straight in, and don't worry, everything is explained as we go. And like Tom said, we will be recording this video and popping it somewhere you can watch it afterwards if you want to catch up on anything or you miss anything. So what is a concept? Before you start any project, no matter how creative or research-based it is, so if it's a photography project, or a history essay. It's impossible to start unless you've got at least the beginning of an idea. So this initial beginning of an idea, especially in creative industries, is often referred to as a concept. So that's what we'll be referring to it as today. But if you just think of concept as start of an idea, it becomes a lot less scary. I'll just pop myself over here. So a creative concept is basically an overarching big idea that captures the intended audience's interest, it influences their emotions and inspires them to take action. So it makes them do what you want them to do. So in terms of fashion and retail, that's often buying something, donating to a cause, or taking part in an event, a movement, etc. So it's a call to action. And it's a unifying theme, so it's used across all channels the brand has. So Instagram, other social channels, a website, a store if your brand has a store, print if you are a magazine. And successful concepts are often distinctive, memorable, unifying, and relevant. So by relevant, looking at social issues, things that people are talking about, wanting to get involved with, things such as sustainability, such as equality. These are social ideas that lots of people want to talk about and want to learn about. So they're really good starting points for concepts. So for the purpose of today's workshop, we will be focusing on thinking about concepts for a new fashion publication. This is a project relevant for both FCP and FMB students, and something we currently run on the course on a larger scale. It's a first year project. We all do it together, and the students start with this concept stage and move on to generating the concept. They make the magazines and they have a load of fun doing it. So we're just going to focus on this initial idea stage today, but it's good to have in your head this project can go a lot further. So I thought I'd give you a little example of a good magazine concept. So a really good example of a strong and successful publication concept is ID magazine. Some of you might have heard of it, some of you might not, doesn't matter at all. Everything you need to know is here on this slide. So the magazine title is a reference to identity, ID, with its focus being on up-and-coming generations in fashion, music, arts and culture. So it wants to share with you the identity of up-and-coming artists, musicians, fashion designers, photographers, etc. And the concept is super simple. The logo, if you look at it, looks like an old school winking face emoji on old school phones. And every cover issue since it launched in the 80s, and it's a monthly magazine, so that's many, many issues, has featured the cover star winking or covering one eye in some way. Either really obviously by holding their hand up, like you can see ASAP Rocky at the bottom there, or more subtly using a shadow or an object to conceal one eye. But it's memorable, it's simple, and it's iconic. It's something they have owned and really made their own over the years. So where do you start with a concept? Concept generation is not scary. It sounds intense, and often students are nervous to get going, but it isn't scary at all. It's really fun, and in the beginning, there's no real restrictions. You kind of set the restrictions as you go along. So initially, some really good questions to ask yourself to kick things off are things like, what issues or themes would your publication cover? Is it high fashion? Is it sustainable fashion? Is it music and fashion? Is it culture? Who would read it? And what do you know about them? How old are they? What are their interests? What other things do they like doing? Are they male? Are they female? Is it for both genders? Is it targeted at people who identify as gender neutral? Is it something that is targeted at anybody? Knowing your audience is really important in helping you make some of the other decisions. So what type of content would you have in? Would you have lots of photo shoots? Would you have interviews, longer articles, tips or how-tos, playlists? If you had social channels online, would you have video content? And coming off from that, would it be just a printed magazine? Would it be just an online platform, or would it be both? Fashion publications have changed massively over the years, and one, the other, or both are just as good or relevant or successful as the other. Can you think of a cool name for it? Sometimes the name is the first thing that you think of. Sometimes the whole magazine's made and the name comes last. Doesn't matter. But if you can think of a cool idea or the start of a cool idea for a name, it's always good to get it down at this stage. And lastly, things like, what would you like it to look like? Would it be really simple? Would it be very, very busy? Would it be colourful, very bold, or kind of calm with lots of muted colours and white space? Would everything run in black and white? Those kind of things. So when you start to think of what you'd like it to be about, who you'd like to read it, what type of stuff you'd like to make for it, then that last bullet point there, the what you'd like it to look like, the ideas start coming for that from answering the questions above. I'll pop those questions back up at the end once we kick off the workshop, so don't worry about remembering them. I thought it was worth mentioning just why it's important that we visualize ideas. Why can't we just tell someone, or explain it verbally or write it down? Well, now more than ever, I think we've all realized it's important we're able to visualize our concepts in order to help us better communicate them to either our teams or our clients. Sometimes we aren't able to meet with people in person, or even via an online call like this one today. We have to email things across to people who've no idea of how you've got your idea, how you think, your justification. So sometimes it's really hard to explain in sentences in an email your ideas. It's much easier to show somebody visually. Other times, we might only have 5 or 10 minutes to explain our ideas. And having a visual prompt, I know it's super useful for me. Having a visual prompt is an excellent way of helping get your ideas across quickly. So it's much easier for you to have something to look at while you're talking, to remind yourself of your idea, and also for the person you're presenting to understand. So a great example is if you said to me, I really like my magazine to be green. There's 1,000 greens in my head, and I might pick a really dark kind of vintagey green, and in your head the green is really bright and fresh, and they give a completely different vibe. So showing me the green that you're talking about instantly puts me in the same headspace as you. So what happens next? So we kick off the workshop. We will all think of and visualize a concept for a fashion publication. That's the aim of today. And you can choose to do this in one of 4 ways. So you can choose to do a digital mood board. Access to InDesign, Photoshop, PowerPoint, or another image program, or a Pinterest account would be useful for this. You can make a 2D physical mood board. So you'd need some cards, some magazine cutouts, some pens, pins, glue, or tape to stick it all together, like the example I have there. A physical 3D mood board, sometimes referred to as a flat lay, is a collection of found objects from around your home and a phone or a camera to photograph them. Sometimes this is a really cool, really quick, easy way of generating an idea and showing a theme. And lastly, but not leastly at all, a mind map. Students use mind maps to start off every project here on our course, and I think I used it every day in industry. So it's a really useful way to quickly get ideas down, and for that you would just need paper and some pens. So the steps we're going to take today, and once we kick things off in a few moments, we will have about 10 minutes, and my trusty back of house Tom will keep an eye on the time for us and let us know when where we're reaching these benchmarks. We'll have about 10 minutes to research and think about our basic idea, and then we'll give you a shout that it's been about 10 minutes, and then you might want to start thinking about how you're going to visualize your idea, which option you'd like to choose, and make sure you're all set up and ready to go. So digital mood boards, you save your imagery into a folder and you set up your file. Physical 2D mood boards, get your pens, paper, imagery, glue, pins, tape, whatever you want to use. The 3D mood board, gather your objects, and if you're choosing the mind map option, make sure you've got pens and paper, and maybe you can make some notes about types of words you might like to include. Then we'll have around 15 minutes to just piece together our mood board or our mind map spider diagram, and then we'll have some time at the end to discuss and share and ask any final questions. So, just a couple of tips before we get going. Your concept doesn't need to be complicated. Simple is often better. And a concept is just the start of an idea. This is super important. You don't have to think of everything. This is also isn't something you, like Tom said, have to finish in a session today. You can start it with us and you can finish it in your own time, go back to it, change it, add to it. Just as a rough guide, mood boards often work best with around 8 to 15 images on. It's about choosing the right ones to best show your idea. And mind maps can have as many words or phrases as you like. Think about the style of image, lettering, colours, layout, theme, etc. as ideas for the types of images you might want to choose or the words you'd like to write. And don't forget, mood boards can have imagery and words on if you like. It's not a mind map if you want to write words, a mood board if you just want pictures. Mood boards, both 2D and 3D, can have a mix of imagery and words on them. So it's time to get going. These are the questions that we talked about earlier, just a reminder of those starting questions, just to get you generating your own concepts. Of course, you can include information that I haven't listed here. If you think of it, you want to add it, that's great. So I think I'm going to leave this screen up for the first 10 minutes of the session, so as you don't have to remember all the questions. But we are ready to kick off. So let's get going, Tom.
Great, yep, I've set the timer. Kat, while we're doing that, I just wondered if you could just describe what the difference is between FCP and FMB. What are they, and how we teach them anyway, while people are kind of just doing this alongside them working on this project. That might be really useful.
Fab. So FCP is fashion communication and promotion, and the other strand of our course is fashion marketing and business. So in many respects, the two courses run side by side. We learn a lot of the same theory. We're aiming to work in the same industries, the same jobs, and the differences come in how we end up visualizing our final ideas. So we all concept just like this, and then the differences come in how we go about visualizing or finalizing our ideas. So over on fashion communication and promotion, we are very visual with our ideas. We do a lot of photo shoots, we make fashion film, we create events, and we do lots of in-store, maybe window displays, lots of social media content. And we start with our concepts and then we express them visually. And students tend to go into roles such as styling, photography, art direction, graphic design, and those very visual ways of creating narrative. And with fashion marketing and business, you start in the very same way. How can we tell a brand story? How can we get an audience engaged? The thinking process is the same. But with FMB, we focus a lot more on the business side of fashion, how fashion works as an industry, how fashion retail works as a business. And we think a lot about strategy and about making sure all your brand touch points are covered in a campaign. We learn about licensing and usage rights. It's a lot more strategic. It's still very creative and still very visual, but if you really want to understand maybe more about buying or PR or the business back end of the fashion industry, which are the cogs that keep it going, FMB is where we really get our teeth into that. So students tend to create business plans for new businesses, or PR packs for events, and go into more strategic, maybe fashion advertising roles, where you're doing a lot of the thinking and the concepting, and then you're working with creatives to help bring it all together. But both courses really do merge with each other. You can be as visual or strategic as you like on either, really, but the focus on FCP is visuals and on FMB is strategy.
Thank you for that. If anyone has any questions around the workshop or around our courses, please ping them into the chat, and we'll look to answer those throughout the workshop. I just got another quick question for you there, Kat. I'd like to know a little bit about your background while people are still making. How did you you've mentioned a little bit about your graphics experience, but what was your kind of journey into the fashion industry? What did that look like?
Well, like I said, unfortunately, FCP courses didn't read. As soon as I graduated, they started, which was a little bit annoying. But I did graphic arts at uni, and I realised really early on I loved fashion magazines, and that was really where I wanted to be. So I would tailor all my projects a little bit to have that fashion element, a bit editorial. So as I made sure my portfolio was slowly getting ready to focus on fashion. And I met through a visiting lecturer that came on my course and did a talk for us, the art director of ID magazine at the time. His name was Dean Langley, and he was going to work at Another Man, and he was going to redesign it, and he wanted some help. And I waved and jumped around and begged him to let me help him, and that's really how I got my foot in the door. It really is a case in this industry of being super willing to have a go at stuff and not be afraid to turn up to networking events. It's super important. And I worked with him on 2 issues of that magazine. And it's owned by Dazed and Confused, bigger magazine. So from working at that smaller magazine, I got a job at the bigger magazine. Working at the bigger magazine got me a really great portfolio to then move on to an agency. I moved on to an agency, just like I said at the beginning, because I loved this bit, this kind of thinking about what could we do with your brand? What could we do with your collection? I loved that. So moving on to agency let me do that for brands over and over again. And then once I had a couple of years of that under my belt and I could prove that I knew how to understand a brand, I then moved on in-house, where you basically become the guardian of the brand as an art director. Every piece of information that goes out into the world with that brand attached to it, you've got to make sure it tells the story of the brand correctly. So slowly over, since graduating, over my years in industry, I built up on my experience each time I changed roles. You don't graduate knowing everything. You don't graduate with every skill you're going to have. You use, and it's really cool. It's really normal, really acceptable to move between these positions to get this experience, because how else are you going to get it? So piece by piece, I moved from magazines to agency to in-house to just increase my experience of understanding brands. And then that led me in-house, and then that led me here to help students understand brands. So it's gone full circle.
Sorry, I should really turn on my microphone. That rounds things off really nicely, actually, for this section. That's around 10 minutes. So if you'd like to carry on.
Fab. So, just to flick back here, so you can obviously still be thinking about your ideas, still be working it out, formulating it in your head, but maybe now start to add into that the way you're going to like to visualize them today. So which of those 4 options you'd like to choose. To make it super easy for me to share with you my option, I'm going to be doing a digital mood board. over on InDesign, which once we get to the piecing your mood board together, I'll flip to my InDesign screen so you can see me piece mine together and move mine around. But so making sure that maybe within the next 10 minutes, you've got all your bits and pieces together, so as you've got the full 15 minutes to start piecing things together. And don't forget, any questions you've got or anything like that, pop them in the chat, and Tom will be able to give me a shout that something is being asked. And don't forget also that if you run out of time today, this is an exercise that you can do again and again and again. It's an exercise you can just start with us here today and work on later, work on in your own time to build upon it. It's one of those exercises that there is almost an infinite length to. You can go as in depth with this as you would like, and you can take it as far as you would like. But just in the back of your heads, around 10 minutes time, we'll be starting to piece our boards together and starting to draw out our mind maps. And I will just keep those questions back up for the moment, because sometimes it's just useful to have a prompt. I think it's useful to remember also when you're searching for imagery, if you're searching for imagery on the internet to use, to just think about what you're searching for. Think about what you're typing into your search engine, or typing into Pinterest if you're using Pinterest. So you don't, you can be with concepts, because they're big overarching ideas. You can be quite generic with your searching at first. Okay, I'm going to do my concept on sustainable fashion. That's what I want my magazine to be about. Great, simply start Googling sustainable fashion. And, you'll get a lot of things that don't appeal to you, and then you'll see something that does. And if you have a little read around what it is, maybe it's a particular designer or a photographer or a event or something, then you can narrow your search and maybe look up that designer or look up that sustainable fashion event. And then your results that you'll get just get more and more relevant to the vibe you're looking for. So the first time you start this, what you get in your search, or what you look for when you open your magazine to rip pages out, will be super broad, and you'll think, that's not what I want, that's not what I'm looking for, that isn't the green I mean, that's not what I'm thinking. But it's just about keeping your eye out for something that catches your attention, focusing on that. What can you learn from that image to help you narrow down your search? And really, really quickly, you will see, those of you who are maybe doing graphics or something like fashion comms at college or school, or media, will really understand the process of that search happens really quickly. And before you know it, everything that you're searching for, you love. And then you've got to make the super hard choice which to choose. So just something to bear in mind.
I was wondering, could you tell us about the pros and cons of using Pinterest for research as well? Because I know that was an interesting discussion that we had previously.
Yes. So Pinterest is, an incredible resource, really, to start to learn how to get your eye in and how to find aesthetically pleasing, beautiful imagery. And the beauty of Pinterest, why it works so well, is that, for example, my mum could make a Pinterest board and she could make it look lovely, because there isn't really any rubbish imagery on Pinterest. It's curated for you. It's pre-filtered. Somebody has decided this is a really nice image for and what can I tag it as? Sustainable, fashion, packaging. So somebody's made those choices for you, which is great to get going and great to learn and great for really quick mood boards, pulling ideas together. What we try and do on our courses is to teach you how to have that filter yourself. Because if you think about it, how many people use Pinterest? An awful lot of people. And you can be really creative and really involved in the fashion industry or your particular industry, and create a beautiful mood board from Pinterest. Or like I mentioned before, you can be my mum sitting at home, not really 100% sure what she's doing, and she can make an equally appealing mood board using Pinterest. The skill, and you might have a lot of the same imagery on there. And the real skill is being able to almost take that Pinterest filter and have it in your brain. So as whether you're looking at the entire World Wide Web, you're looking at a big stack of magazines, you're walking around an exhibition, you're just walking around a city, a cool city, no matter where you are or what your resource is, you can filter out the aesthetically pleasing, relevant images. And what it does is just opens up the potential for you to find images that no one else has found. Because some of the best ideas and some of the most, if you go right back to really successful concepts and memorable and iconic and original, you want to have images on your mood board that the competing agency doesn't have. You want your mood board to be unique and to stand out as much as possible. So as you go through, as you learn about that, having that filter and being able to make those choices in your head, the more unusual and original imagery you're able to find. And it starts to move you away from Pinterest a little bit. And by the time you get to third year, I said to Tom last week, by the time you get to third year, it's no Pinterest from me. I don't want to see students using Pinterest to get their imagery. They're either creating it themselves or they're finding it in cool books and cool magazines they found in the library, exhibitions or places they visited, and the results are substantially more exciting. But Pinterest as somewhere to start and somewhere to learn is a really good resource. We like to become Pinterest instead. We take on the filter and we learn to do that for ourselves.
Cool, thank you. So we've got a few more minutes left on this section, but I know that you've run a similar workshop to this many times before, but kind of in person. And what are the main kind of things when other students are developing their kind of magazines? What are the main themes that are coming through that people are interested in at the moment?
I think over the last couple of years we've been running this workshop, really the same kind of themes are emerging that students are interested in. That you guys, what you need to remember is that you guys now, and when you come to us as students, you are the voice of the next generation. You are the voice of the next set of people that are going to be buying stuff. So what you believe in and what you feel is important, even if it doesn't feel like it now, will be the things that brands are talking about, will be things that publications are centered around. So I think it's really interesting that over the years we've seen an increase in the same type of ideas coming out of this workshop. So a lot of the time I've got a couple of examples here as well to remind me what past students have done. There is a lot of students interested in sustainable fashion, but sustainable fashion in a cool way, not sustainable fashion in a green and beige and it's made out of linen and it's a canvas tote bag way. How can streetwear be sustainable? How can urban fashion be sustainable? what about resale and secondhand clothing? You know, lots of students really interested in that secondhand market and really kind of getting to grips with that culture. We lots and lots of students wanting to explore diversity and equality through fashion as a really realizing it's such a powerful platform and reaches an extremely large amount of people. It's a really good platform for that voice, and lots of students have gone on to create, when we do this project for real on our course, create magazines centered around diversity, equality, maybe focusing on some of the minority groups within that LGBTQ plus publications, celebrating everything that's brilliant about that culture. But I think throughout everything, whether it be a political or an environmental issue or an issue around equality and diversity, the overarching thread is that students are wanting to celebrate youth culture, celebrate that you are the next generation and the next voice, and not something to be ignored. And I think that comes across really strongly, whether the mood board is really pretty and editorial and quite Vogue-like in what students would like it to look like, or it's really gritty and grungy and streetwear. No matter what aesthetic students choose to go down, there is this really strong voice present across the concepts, which I think is really encouraging to see, because that's what we're here for, and that's what we hope to get you doing. So I think it's a really great project for helping people really think about what's important to them and what they'd really like to channel and change. And I think then we work out going about how to do that visually on FCP or strategically on FMB. So
that's fascinating. That is really interesting. Thank you, Kat. I think we've come towards the end of that kind of section. If you want to.
So I will. So we should now have thought about our idea a bit, decided what type of mood board we're going to make, how we're going to visualize our idea. So now we'll have around 15 minutes to piece it all together. So what I will do now, hopefully, she says, there we go, is be able to share with you my InDesign screen. So I have got here images that I've saved. I've got them all here ready. And I'm going to start piecing them together into my InDesign file and moving them around and hopefully creating a mood board myself. So while this next kind of super makey 15 minutes is going on, I will just be sharing my screen live with you here. And then just before the end, I'll flick back to the questions just before we do show and tell at the end. So let's get making. Some of you might have already started. If you need an extra couple of minutes to gather your stuff together, don't worry about it. But the majority of you, if you're able to kick off the make now, that would be great. And don't forget, when you're making a mood board, I think sometimes it's really hard to not be so precious about images. And if you've maybe spent, I don't know, 15 minutes finding something, 10 minutes finding an image, and then once you've put it on your mood board, you know, you don't really like it, it's not really working, but oh, you spent all that time trying to find it, delete it. You know, that it really is sometimes a less is more situation. if an image is ever so slightly not right, it'll throw your whole idea off. So don't be afraid to change your mind. Don't be afraid to delete something you thought was perfect 5 minutes ago. There is no right way to get to the final answer. And if you just imagine when if you're trying to narrow down, if you've got loads and loads of ideas and you've got loads of pictures, if you try and imagine, I'm that way, and I'll have hundreds of ideas and hundreds of images, and to help me filter down what to choose, I always think, if I was having to present this to someone with the money to let me go and do it, which is often why you present something to a client, to get them to sign off on it and let you make it. What images, if I had 10 minutes to present to them, what are the key things? What are the key things that I want to make sure I don't forget to say? Because I use a mood board just like you would like a prompt card if you were doing a presentation. So I almost like to think, okay, I want to make sure I mention the color, or I really want to make sure I mention the style of photography, or I really want to make sure I mention this particular person I'd love to feature in it, for example. You can just make sure that that's how you start to narrow down your image choices. So then your mood board becomes a prompt card. And you might say a lot of other stuff in the presentation, but when you're gone and the client is left with just your visuals, they're the things that they're going to remember as the key. There's loads of other stuff that can come, but these are the key ideas that you're trying to get across to them. And sometimes that just helps when it's super hard to narrow down. You might love all your images, but you can't use them all sometimes.
Kat, what makes a strong mood board? I mean, you've kind of been answering that a little bit as we've been going, but like, what stands out to you?
I think a strong mood board is often sounds quite strange to say, a confident one. It's why I say about 8 to 15 images, because sometimes the less you have on a mood board, the more I will look at each individual picture. If you show me a mood board completely covered with imagery, I mean, it might look like, whoa, that's amazing. Look how well researched this is, or look how many cool ideas you found. But then all those 50 images just kind of merge into one, and I come away like, oh yeah, there was loads on it, but I couldn't really tell you what was on it. There was a general theme around, I think, sustainability or around streetwear, but I'm not sure there was so much on there. Whereas I think mood boards that get to the point and say it in less imagery, I think you really look at the images, and I think you start as the viewer to make connections and see what the story is. And I think also a really good part of being able to tell that story is things like hierarchy. I can show you what I mean here on my screen now. So, for example, I think I've got, okay. So I kind of found this quote here, the new establishment, which I really liked for the vibe of my magazine, and I felt like it was a really bold statement about things are changing. This is the new cool. This is the new way we're going to do things, and I think that might be quite crucial for my concept. What I want is it, you know, really nice and big somewhere on that mood board. So as you understand, you really understand what I'm trying to say. If I put it over here and I put, lots of other imagery like this around it, let's move it down here. It's still on there, but it loses a bit of its power. And as a viewer, I might think, oh, that's on there, but that's not an important part of the story. What seems like a much more important part of the story is, say, oh, that kind of skater dude in black and white there. So when you're putting a mood board together, it's really important to think about the size of the images you're putting on, and also to remember that we as humans, we will look at things from left to right. That's how we read, left to right. That's how we take information in. So if you think about this mood board, if you can see my arrow, my cursor, you will view this mood board subconsciously or deliberately or not. You won't be aware you're doing it, but you will view this mood board in this kind of clockwise direction. So bearing that in mind, when you're piecing your mood board together, I think understanding how people take information in gets you the best results, really. And just remembering what's important to you and what's good, but a background. Like so this pink color, for example, I quite like this images here on my mood board because I like the colors, and I quite like the style of using instant Polaroids. But I don't need that to be huge for that pink to stand out, really, because there's not much color currently on my mood board. So that can be quite small, and you're still going to see it and going to remember that pink. Whereas I think something like this quote would need to be bigger to have the impact that I want it to.
That's a really interesting point about the hierarchies. But how, in terms of text and imagery on a mood board, what's the right proportion or ratio? Like, does every image need explaining in some way, or like in terms of statements and quotes, how are they kind of interlaced together? What kind of works and what doesn't work as well?
I think in this initial concept stage, if you're taking a project and running with it, and you end up running with it right until completion, there'll be many rounds of this type of thing that you do. And what you might do is have this initial starting point here where you're just looking at top line ideas. Like we said before, these are just the starting points. So the words might be quite generic. So you might have terms like I mentioned earlier, such as bold or black and white or grungy, or you might have glossy, minimalist, those kind of words. And then what you would do from that mood board is you would make a bold mood board. You would then make a grungy mood board. You would then take maybe those 5 or 6 phrases or words that you have on this concept mood board, and you would go into a bit more detail on each of them. So when I say colourful, you might put colourful on there. What do you in this instance, you don't have to pick those colours. You don't have to tell me how colourful. But the next stage of concepting would be to really define what you mean by that. So mood boards will get, the closer you get to finalising your ideas, the mood boards will get much more detailed and have much more information on them. But maybe as a starting concept of what is your idea when you have around this much time to do it, which is often the amount of time you have in real life to pull these things together. If you stuck with 8 to 15 images and you maybe had 5 or 6 pieces of text, be it a quote, a singular word, a phrase, something like that, just to give me the entire, you're after the big overarching idea, and then you delve into the details of that a bit later. But what you don't want to do at this first stage is overwhelm whoever you're going to show this to with so much information and so much detail that they can't quite see or take in what you mean.
Thanks for that, Kat. And then just before we move on to the next thing, because time's pressing on slightly, but when you pitch your mood board, how would you do that? What would your tips be when you're kind of putting forward this idea to some sort of client?
I think to not have anything on there that you're not 100% behind. If you've put an image on there that you think, oh, I don't really like it, but there was a space that I needed to fill, so I've put it there. All it's going to do is throw you off, because you're going to look at your mood board, like I say, left to right in this clockwise motion as you're talking through it. And it's going to be a little anomaly in your head that you're not super happy with that picture. You could have found a better one. 5 minutes, you could have found a better one. So that might throw you off or make you seem unsure of yourself. So I would say when pitching a mood board, make sure everything on there you're confident with, and helps explain your concept, that you've trialed it out beforehand, not just the temptation so frequently is to make your mood board here on your laptops, sat in your room or in the studio here, and then save it, look at it, and think to yourself, does that make sense? But the problem is that the idea is in your head. So of course it makes sense to you because you've put it together. So you know why you've put these pictures or quotes or texts together. But the person you will be presenting to has no idea. So sometimes it's always useful, and it's a task and a session that we always do with students in seminars when we share our work with each other, is we ask someone else. We don't go straight from our own heads to the client. We put someone else in between. We have a little dry run, a little tester, and see if somebody else who didn't think of it and doesn't know your idea, if they understand what you mean. And I think it gives you a really good confidence boost that, oh, actually, no, I did. Like, I wanted this 90s grunge vibe. I've achieved it. Or, oh, God, I thought that image really represented the 90s, but, oh, this person just had never heard of that film or so sometimes we're too much in our own heads, especially when we work so remotely like we're having to do at the moment. It's super easy to get lost in your own head. And sometimes, like with this workshop, for example, we had a run through myself and Tom last week, it's so important to show other people and give yourself a dry run with anything, but with visuals as well, because they're such a subjective thing. Yeah.
Kat, I'm going to have to move things on there. Like we've got to 11:30, so we really we need to kind of start wrapping things up a little bit. But for those of you that need to head off and do other things, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to stick about for a bit longer though, to kind of wrap things up with the workshop session a little bit more. But Kat, if you'd like to crack on.
Yeah. So, in the interest of time, I this morning just before the workshop used the imagery that I collected and to pull my mood board together here, where I had time to think about it, and I wasn't talking about the courses or anything in between. So this is what I would present as my finished concept board for my publication. I will give you, I don't know, 30 seconds about why I've put, what my magazine would be about, why I've put these images here. So I was thinking my magazine would really be about celebrating kind of that 90s culture, that 90s aesthetic, something that I grew up with. I really like that tactile aesthetic of Polaroids, of instant imagery. Big fan of the 90s, and maybe my magazine would feature iconic artists, fashion designers, people in music and culture from the 90s, and celebrate that as a decade, a really influential decade, especially now in 2020, and where this scene has really come back into fashion and really been taken up by the younger generation. So with that kind of grainy aesthetic of instant film and 90s grunge a little bit, the rest of the magazine would be quite bold. There's lots of white space here. The font is quite bold and clean. I would feature artists, art, fashion accessories, everything with a bit of an urban twist to it, whether that's in the styling or the choice of location or the choice of artists that I'd feature. And really, in terms of a concept, that's as much as you need to say or know at this stage, really. So I think hopefully that vibe comes across in my mood board there. But yeah, I think if maybe anybody, Tom, if anybody would like to share their thoughts or where they're at with their project, that would be cool.
Great. So at this stage, then maybe if it's all right, we'll round things up, Kat, and then I'll just kind of give the kind of outro information shortly. But yeah, we'd love to see your work. So in the meantime, while I'm just kind of going to be wrapping things up, if you would like to stay on and you would like to share your work with Kat for us to have a little look at, if you could just put yes into the chat, and when I finish the little outro bit, we'll look to have a little look at what you've been making. So in the meantime, just before we do finish today, I'm just going to read from my script. I just want to remind you that we're running a wide range of workshops across the summer school, and you'll be emailed a link of these to be able to get involved. As there's 3 more workshops that are coming up. So the next 3 include album cover design, looking at actors' perspectives, as well as writing for film and TV. So please do get involved with us for the live workshops, but also because you've attended this one, we will be sending you the videos of all of the workshops that have taken place over the summer school workshop series. If you haven't already, you can book your place on the website, and we'll be popping into the chat. Emma, if that's all right, Emma, will be popping in the link to be able to sign up to the upcoming workshops. We're also offering the opportunity to receive an official NUA certificate that many of you will know about already. This is a great talking point for any UCAS personal statement that you'll be putting together, or you might be putting together. To get hold of one of these certificates, all you need to do is attend 6 of our 12 workshops and submit work from 3 of them to us at student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk. And once again, we'll be putting that in the chat, so you'll be able to access that there. What have I written here? So these outcomes could be something that you've made as part of this live workshop, or it might be something that you watch the recording afterwards and you send it to us subsequently. So you could send it to us maybe next week, and that would be absolutely fine. We also really want to see what you're making throughout the summer school workshop series. So if you'd like to send your work to us on our Instagram account, which is @NUA Outreach, we'll be sharing some of our favourite pieces throughout the series. And once again, we'll be plugging that into the chat as well, so you can do that there. So we'd really love to hear what you've thought about the workshop. So I'm going to be running a short poll in just a moment, so you can give us your thoughts. This should only take like just a couple of minutes, and there's only 3 short questions which should appear on your screen right about now. Okay, so my first question to you all is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how enjoyable have you found this workshop? So 1, it was excellent. 2, it was good. 3, it was okay. 4, less than I thought. Or 5, not very much. The next question is, would you recommend this summer school workshop to a friend or colleague? And the answers are yes, no, or maybe in the middle there as well. And the third question is, since taking part in our workshops, have they made you more likely to apply to a creative subject or to a creative subject in education? Yes, unsure, or no. If you could plug in your answers, please, that would be great. We'll leave that open for 10 more seconds or so before ending the polling. But if you could enter those in, that would really help us. So thank you very much to those of you that have already plugged in your answers. That's fantastic. Okay, I'll close that in 5 seconds. 2, 1. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Now, each week we are giving away 1 NUA Chili's bottle. These bottles, I think, are lush. We've been giving away 1 each week, like I say. They're really cool little thing to have. So with your chance to be in with your chance of winning one of those, all you need to do is fill out a feedback form and send it over to us. So there's been plenty of chances to win one of those. Like I say, we'll be hanging around for the next few moments. So if you have any questions for Kat, please plug those into the chat as well. And also we'll be having a little look at some of the work that you've been producing as well. So great, let's have a little look at what you guys have been making. Right. And also for those of you that have just been taking part as well, just thank you. Thank you for coming, and please join us again. Great, let's have a little look. Right. I'm going to start sharing some videos, Kat. So if you keep an eye on your video bar, that would be great. Oh, that one person has just gone.
Hi. I would like to share my screen.
Brilliant. Is that Julia?
Yes. Can I share
Hi.
my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen, yeah.
I did it on InDesign.
Oh, sorry, yes, you want your share screen option. Brilliant. We'll look to do that. Sorry. So you are now a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Well, I'm sharing this mood board I made, and it's about comfort at home, because it's something we've been looking for very much lately. And I put some of my own photos, like this piece of bread and the scrambled eggs, that view from the window as well. And I guess this is about how much I've been connecting with the plants that I have at home, with the small things like making a good cup of coffee and the space of work that I have.
I think this is amazing. I think number one, it all looks, whether it's images you've taken yourself, like the toast or the scrambled egg, or it's some of the images you found, they have the same aesthetic to them. So you're understanding that they could all come from the same publication, the same place. And I think with your idea of we've all been in lockdown, we've all been at home, this is what we've been surrounded by, that's really that relevant thing I was talking about what's happening socially, what can everybody relate to. And I think this is a really lovely idea. I think there's a really nice, you've obviously got a really nice eye for layout. You've created a really nice tied together mood board. And I think if you had 5 minutes to pitch this, I think you wouldn't struggle to get anybody, even if they weren't part of today's workshop, to understand. And I think your use of a definition here in the middle and just keeping it really, really simple, again, sticks with the Japanese aesthetic as well. Very simple, very clean, no fuss. I think it's lovely. I think it's really successful. Well done, Julia. Thank you for sharing.
Great. We're going to stick around for a few more minutes. So if anyone else would like to share their work, please just say yes on the chat and we'll have a little review. But other than that, thank you for taking part. And if you've got any further questions, do let us know. We'll hang around for another 5 minutes or so. Okay, so we've had a question, Kat, come in. So my friend has a clothing line, so called West Insight, and I would love to know how he could make his brand get more recognized and potentially be featured in fashion shows, or what steps he could take, etc. Also, how to make his Instagram grow. How do you grow a brand?
How do you grow a brand? It's the $1 million question. I think what any brand, whether it's a massive brand, you know, that everybody's heard of, like a Gucci or Louis Vuitton, or whether it's your friend's clothing line called West Insight. I think what both need to do is know their audience and know them really, really well, because, you know, we might all want the Louis Vuitton, but we're not all consumers, we're not all customers. I'm not unless somebody drops me at the end of a rainbow. I'm not. So I won't fully engage with their content. I'm not a consumer. A brand maybe like Zara, they've got more chance of getting me. I'm closer to being a true consumer. So I would, you know, they would need to know more about me than Louis Vuitton would to be able to connect with me. So I think what your friend needs to do, what they really need to think about is who does he want to wear his clothes? Who, in an ideal, who is that person? What do they, you know, who are they? Think about the questions we asked earlier on about publication. What are they interested in outside of the clothes? Where do they hang out? What do they spend their money on? What do they do with their spare time? What channels on the internet do they use? You know, do they actually use Instagram? Are they interacting with it? Are they TikTok users? Do they respond to moving image on Instagram? Do they respond to still imagery? Really kind of putting that effort in to really looking and researching what your demographic do will help you reach them. And once you know how to reach them, you can tailor your content. And that's the way to naturally make your social media presence grow. What you don't want to do, obviously, is purchase followers. It's an instant win. It might seem like it's a good idea, but it's incredibly transparent in today's switched on tech technologically awesome generation, you can see through it, and all it does is demean your brand. So really spending the time to research, and so say you know lots of your ideal consumer love trailers or little GIFs or moving images on Instagram, based on who else they follow and what they're liking. You can maybe start to filter that into your own content, and that's a really good way of instantly kind of knowing before you've done it, they're going to watch this because they like this kind of stuff. So gradually, a slow, gradual increase of engagement on your platform is much more beneficial than kind of an instant overnight win. But yeah, if you take one piece of advice back to him, it's really look at his consumer, because without your consumer, you don't have a brand. Whether you are Louis Vuitton or whether you are a one-man band starting out, you need the consumers.
Great,
it's
thank
quite
you.
exciting. I wish I had a little brand to work on. I don't know how I do that, but it's very fun. So I hope he does well with it.
Excellent. Hey, thank you, Kat. It doesn't appear that we have any more questions at this stage. However, if anyone does have any questions and once again to submit your work, please submit that to us at student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk. We'd love to see what you've been up to. And do add us on Instagram as well. We'd love to see what you've been doing there as well. Other than that, guys, once again, thank you so much for taking part. Kat, thank you so much for leading us this morning. And Emma, thank you very much for arranging this as well. Right, we hope to see you again soon, but for now, we'll catch you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very much.